Lennox Lewis has come out and basically sided with Deontay Wilder over this Anthony Joshua Wilder negotiation because he has been speaking to Deontay Wilder. I don't know if they spoke in person or if they spoke behind the scenes, but clearly, judging by what Lewis has said here, he's been having conversations with Deontay Wilder, and Wilder, he says, has been explaining what's been going on in these negotiations for the Joshua fight. So Lennox Lewis says as follows, and he said this to the journalist Jeff Powell of the Daily Mail. He said, "Go order Eddie Hearn to make the fight with Deontay Wilder. Now is the moment when you must take charge of your own destiny. There is no question that it is Wilder who wants the fight, and it is Wilder who wants to prove that he is the man in this new heavyweight era. He explained to me all the difficulties he is having with Anthony and Eddie, of how AJ is listening to Hearn. Deontay most definitely wants this fight more than any fight. Joshua said he would take $50 million in a heartbeat, but when that offer came, he didn't accept. I would have taken $50 million quicker than a heartbeat and gone through with any fight, but I never ducked anyone. Bo did everything he could to avoid fighting me, but I forced the situation. I did so by ordering my manager Frank Maloney to go out and do whatever it took to make the fight. Yes or yes, no arguments. Then Riddick had to meet me or vacate. It comes to the point where the boxer has to take over from the manager or promoter as the boss. Oscar De La Hoya and me were the first to take charge of our business. I took control of my destiny and opened up my chance for greatness. Anthony needs to do the same with Eddie." So those are the words of Lennox Lewis. Now, he may well be right, but then again, he may well be wrong, because he's had this conversation with Deontay Wilder. Has he had a similar conversation with Anthony Joshua? He hasn't spoken about it, if he has. So, if he hasn't had a similar conversation with Joshua, in order for me to take his comments more seriously, he needs to have that kind of conversation with him, with Anthony Joshua, because there are two sides to every story, and the truth is usually, or very often, somewhere in the middle. There's, how does the saying go? There's your version, there's my version, and then there's the truth. That's they're saying something like that. So yeah, we need to hear Lennox Lewis having a conversation behind the scenes with Anthony Joshua to see what his perspective is. I mean, he could be right. Maybe Hearn is calling all the shots and Anthony Joshua is just a puppet and he needs to take control of his career. That could be the case. I've entertained this possibility before. But at the same time, maybe it's not the case. And at the same time, maybe Deontay Wilder is a puppet too. Here's what I'll tell you about Deontay Wilder. He strikes me as somebody who is far easier to manipulate than Anthony Joshua. Far easier. I've watched Anthony Joshua over the years in interviews and stuff like that. I've seen his behavior. Anthony Joshua is a very calculating kind of person. Yes, he does have an inner rage in him, but he's a very calculating kind of guy. He's smart. If anyone who thinks Anthony Joshua is not smart, you really are barking up the wrong tree. Anthony Joshua is a very, very smart guy. He understands psychology, with relation to fighting. He understands business. He's a very smart guy. And if he's allowing Eddie Hearn to make all the decisions, or if Eddie Hearn is making all the decisions in his career, then that's because Anthony Joshua is allowing him to do that. Anthony Joshua thinks it's best to allow Eddie Hearn to do that. In my view, unless there are some kind of contractual stipulations which preclude Anthony Joshua from taking control of his career, then he's making the decision to allow them to do it. If that's the case, I'm not saying it is. Because as I say, Anthony Joshua is a very smart man. There could be a situation where Eddie Hearn is duping him, where Eddie Hearn is telling Anthony one thing, but then he's doing another thing and keeping Anthony in the dark. There's a possibility of that. Even a smart guy, if he's not in the negotiations, if he's not at the negotiating table, if he's not having the conversations on the phone, even a smart guy could get double crossed by his own promoter. That's possible, you know? So who knows? It's all speculation at the end of the day. But when it comes to Deontay Wilder, the reason I say Wilder would be easier to manipulate is because he's so emotional. He's such an emotional guy. He's always flying off at the handle. Somebody like that, just from my real life experience, is easier to manipulate. Someone who you know is going to fly off the handle. You know, I'm not this kind of person, but if you are a manipulative kind of person that wants to use people as pawns in your little game, and you know someone flies off the handle, you go whisper in their ear. You know, go tell them, oh, this, that, and the other, and so said this about you, and, you know, isn't it bad how this person's always doing this and getting away with that? And you know you're going to get the response that you want, right? They're going to fly off the handle and, you know, you're going to use that to whatever end you want. That's what you have with Deontay Wilder. You got a guy who you can whisper in his ear and get him upset very easily. Anthony Joshua's not like that. He's a much more calm and calculating kind of person. So, again, if Lennox Lewis has sat down with both of them separately and heard both sides of the story, then I'll take his comments more seriously. Some people are saying Lennox Lewis sounds jealous and this, that, and the other. I don't think so. I mean, Lennox Lewis has an ego and he was a very arrogant fighter, but I don't think he's jealous of Joshua or jealous of Fury or jealous of Deontay Wilder. I think he's just, you know, he's just saying what he sees based upon the conversations he's had with these fighters. You know, I remember when him and Tyson Fury had beef, and he was saying that he could beat Tyson Fury right now, even though he was 50 or whatever at the time. But they squashed the beef, and since that time, he's talking a lot more complimentary about Tyson Fury. But there was a time when he was saying a lot of derogatory things about Fury because Fury was saying a lot of derogatory things about him. But once they squashed the beef, it was all good, you know? And now he's very complimentary of the man. So, and here's one thing I'll say about Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis is not the most educated man. That's what you have to understand. A lot of people, especially a lot of Americans, they see Lennox Lewis and, you know, he's raised in the UK and in Canada. Oh, he must be educated. No, Lewis is not really an educated guy. I think he understands the business of boxing, but if you ever hear Lennox Lewis speak, he doesn't come across as the most intelligent, you know, educated human being. He's got intelligence to a certain degree, and he was certainly an intelligent boxer, but Lennox Lewis is not an intellectual. That's one thing I can say. He's not an intellectual man. He's not a smart man. I can, you know, and I'm talking in relative terms here. I'm not saying he's dumb, but when I look at smart boxers who are actually intellectual, Lennox Lewis is not somebody who I would pick as an intellectual who, you know, understands much outside of the world of boxing, who really understands human psychology that well. No, Lennox Lewis is not that guy. Anthony Joshua, I think, is smarter than Lennox Lewis. Let me think of some other fighters who are smarter. Some people might find this bizarre, but I think Dillian Whyte is one of the smartest boxers out there. And Dillian Whyte is not a highly educated man at all. But there's a difference between being educated and being intelligent. This is one thing I will say, okay? And maybe I should have also said this with Lennox Lewis. There's a difference between being educated and being intelligent. There are plenty of people out there who are educated. They've been to school. They've retained a lot of information in their head, which they can regurgitate on cue. That's all being qualified in whatever, you know, trade or whatever, you know, whatever degree you have. That's all it is at the end of the day, for the most part. Is you being able to retain a bunch of information and then regurgitate it on cue. That's how you get qualifications. That's different to being intelligent. An intelligent person is someone who can work things out for themselves. Intelligence it can be taught, but it's more innate in my view. Just as some people are naturally more confident, naturally more aggressive, you know, people have different aptitudes or different abilities or different qualities when it comes to their character and when it comes to their physicality. And intelligence is also one of those aptitudes. Some people are just mentally sharp and they might never have been to school. They might not be able to read or write, but they're mentally sharp. They can read people. They can read situations. They understand the human mind. Just, they have a natural aptitude for it. And I'm telling you now, Dillian Whyte is one of those guys. I'm not saying Dillian Whyte is perfect. Dillian Whyte has his own, character flaws and weaknesses. But overall, Dillian Whyte is one of the sharpest minds I've seen in boxing. He's a very, very bright and intelligent person, Dillian Whyte. Yeah, I know he's not educated and his English is not always the best. But if you listen carefully to the stuff he says, he's a bright guy, Dillian Whyte. He is very bright and he's one of the people who knows his boxing the best. He knows a hell of a lot about boxing, Dillian. You'd be amazed how many boxers don't really know that much about boxing. But ask Dillian Whyte a question about boxing. He's going to tell you what happened in the fight this weekend on the undercard with some obscure fight. This guy knows his boxing. So Dillian Whyte, intelligent. Joshua's intelligent. Let me think of some other fighters who are intelligent. Obviously, Mayweather's intelligent with regards to boxing. He's not a very worldly man. He's a very ignorant man. But with regards to boxing and the business of boxing, he's relatively intelligent. But then you think Al Heyman is really the brains behind Mayweather and was all along. Let me think of some other fighters. David Price is an intelligent man. He comes across as an intelligent man. Even though he's no great shakes as a fighter, he comes across as intelligent. And I'm sure there are a whole heap of other fighters out there who I could be mentioning who are, who I notice as them being intelligent, relatively intelligent. Lennox Lewis is not one of those guys. He's got ring intelligence, yes. But outside the ring, I wouldn't look at Lennox Lewis as somebody to give me pearls of wisdom. Let's just put it that way. I just wouldn't. I'd look at, there may be other fighters out there who I'd look to for that, but not Lennox Lewis. So, anyway, let's wait till Lennox Lewis hears AJ's side of the story, and maybe he'll feel the same way. Maybe he already has heard AJ's side of the story behind the scenes, and he's not convinced by it, and he's still coming out with this. Who knows? But until we can confirm one way or the other, then the jury's out for me on Lennox Lewis's comments here. So let me know how you feel in the comment section below. It's happening. I'm out.